I don't know if I'm going to be able to give my baby what they need and what they want.
Before coronavirus, Elizabeth Laker was busy planning for the future, but it's a future which now looks very different. She was made redundant just 4.5 hours before lockdown was officially announced. She asked her company to furlough her instead. They refused.
It's scary, very scary. I don't know if I can stay living here anymore. Don't know if I can pay my rent. Don't know if I can afford to cook my meals, pay gas and electric, things like that. I don't know how next month we're going to be able to keep this roof over our head, because we physically don't have the funds to survive anymore. Going from living a comfortable life, a reasonably comfortable life, to then having to look at every little thing you do. Can I put the kettle on to make myself a cup of tea? Have I got enough gas and electric for that? There's always a knock-on effect of what's going to happen.
Elizabeth, who worked for an estate agent, gets some help from her family, but says everyone has been hit hard.
Out of the 8 adults in my family, 4 were furloughed, and myself has been made redundant, and as well as another family member has been made redundant as well. So it's had a massive impact on my family alone, let alone all the other millions of people in the UK.
The man charged with saving as many jobs as possible today predicted very tough times ahead.
There will be more hardship to come. This lockdown is having a very significant impact on our economy. We are likely to face a severe recession, the likes of which we haven't seen, and of course that will have an impact on employment.
According to the latest figures, 2.1 million people claimed unemployment benefit in April. That's up more than 850,000 from March. It's the biggest month-on-month increase since records began in 1971. The hardest hit regions have been the tourism and hospitality-heavy southwest, as well as Northern Ireland and the southeast. And young people are among the hardest hit. New research shows more than 1 in 3 18 to 24-year-olds are earning less than before the coronavirus outbreak began. It took Ben Wilson months to find his new job as a medical researcher. He lost it after just 2 days when lockdown was announced. One of hundreds of thousands of people who didn't qualify to be furloughed because they'd started new jobs. He says he's been left with nothing, least of all hope.
Honestly, I'm just scared. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't know how I'm going to get another job, especially with up to 2 million more unemployed. I don't know how I'm supposed to compete with people who've got 10, 20 years of experience. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my life now.
Ben says he's luckier than many financially as he's still living with his parents, but it's taken its toll in other ways.
Yeah, as I said, I'm seeing a therapist about depression. I'm empty. I just don't know what to do. It's difficult to write an application saying, oh, what are your best features when you're sat there on the sofa empty.
Poppy Campbell-Gillick is one of an estimated 500,000 people working in hospitality who've already lost their jobs. She has autism and says finding a job in the first place was really hard. She fears finding a new one will be almost impossible.
I feel lonely because I'm not at work anymore. I don't have the support of my co-workers, and I feel lonely because I have really lost my purpose in the world. I don't feel hopeful at all. I think there's going to be a very competitive market for even the most simple jobs, and it's just going to get very difficult to even get an interview.
A bleak assessment, but backed by the facts. Today's numbers are only the beginning. Next month's expected to be very much worse.
Our political editor Gary Gibbon joins us now from Westminster. Gary.
Well, those stark words from the Chancellor you heard in Jackie's report are there to dispel any notion that's out there that there could be an easy bounce-back recovery. Some of this goes back to a forecast from the independent forecaster of the Office for Budget Responsibility last month, when they left some people thinking that a so-called V-shaped recovery, where you just ping back to growth, might happen. The OBR have since corrected and heavily caveated that, but nonetheless I think the Chancellor thinks it has entered the consciousness of people, and he wants to banish it and make people brace themselves for a U-shaped recovery, where the bottom of that U really could be quite long and severe. And he's doing that in part because he's Chancellor. He wants to look like he knew this thing was coming if it turns up. That gives credibility to any policy options he comes up with. I think he thinks that it has entered the consciousness of some Tory MPs that a ping-back recovery is a real distinct possibility, and he thinks he needs to dispel that to make sure that they engage with some of the serious policy options, and grim ones probably from their perspective, that they might have to, like tax rises. And I think he thinks also that out there in the wider public, maybe this sense that they have a very, very good grip, I think people in the Treasury say, the public, of the risk of COVID-19, maybe not such a good grip of the risks of the economic threat that we are facing. And I think he doesn't want exactly to get sort of parity of fear there, but he wants to tilt the scales a little bit.
Gary Gibbon. Well, a short while ago, I spoke to the former Conservative leader and ex-Work and Pensions Secretary, Sir Ian Duncan Smith. And I began by asking him what sort of shaped recession he thinks we're looking at.
Going into lockdown was relatively easy. Coming out has always posed a problem, and it's posing a problem to other countries as well. So it's going to be slower.
So how do you get out of it without austerity?
This process is going to be certainly probably on the slow side. Given that, it means, therefore, we must treat the debt, I think, like we treat wartime debt. We are very much in that area. Significant amount of debt needs to be looked at in the longer term. The most important thing is to get the economy moving, and that may require counterfactual kind of ways of doing it, such as coming out rather than trying to claw money back. You're looking to actually cut regulations, cut taxes on businesses.
On getting the economy going, you've called for the government to look, instead of 2-metre distancing, to look at 1-metre distancing. Are you not a bit beyond your own expertise here?
No, well, it's not me calling for this. It's me simply referencing what the WHO says as we come out and what other countries have done. The WHO said that the social distancing of all the things that people have to do, social distancing is not the most vital part. It's important. The most vital part is hygiene. It's important to get the economy moving. There is no idea that somehow it doesn't matter. The longer we stay in lockdown, the more companies will go bankrupt. The more companies go bankrupt, the more people fall onto unemployment benefit. And if they're on unemployment benefit, then they're not going to be able to afford quite a lot of the things that they do. Governments will rack up even more debt.
It's quite revolutionary, you know, for you to accept that we take on a large amount of debt, you know, as if it's a massive wartime type situation in order to protect the country and avoid austerity. There is no real reason to either rush it or for any businesses to go bust. The government could support every one of them.
No. There is a limit to all of this. You can't just go on the idea that there is some vast pot of money you just keep borrowing, because people who lend money, the sovereign funds, etc., are going to ask the question about, is the UK serious about trying to get its economy
The whole world's in the same boat.
No, well, other countries are already moving out. And so the problem is, if the UK doesn't do that, then the UK becomes a country that people lose faith in. And that means, therefore, the cost of borrowing rises dramatically.
Sir Ian Duncan Smith, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Well, joining me now from Florida is the former member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, David Blanchflower. This is a radically different sounding approach to what the Conservative Party did after 2008, where they're now talking about long-term debt, or some of them are. Do you believe it, and can it be done?
Well, I certainly believe that they have moved in that direction. I believe that they should do that. And I think the analogy is a perfectly sensible one. Think of it as a war. If you were invaded, what would you do? And what you'd do is you'd have to respond in every way you can to these poor folks that you just played and talked about. The unemployment rate is going to go through the roof, and this is going to take a long time to recover from. And we just don't know what responses people are going to make. The behavioral responses of people to this pandemic is the really unknown thing. And the likelihood is it won't even be a V. I think it's more likely, I won't even think it'll be a U. It'll probably be an L. So think of that, straight down and very slowly out.
So is there a limit then to how much debt you take on? I mean, is there a point at which you lose your credibility with the markets, or can you just keep racking it up and saying we're in unprecedented times and we've got to pay for it?
I think the answer is yes. I think that's what you have to do. I think that's exactly what you have to do at the beginning. I mean, the analogy is the ship goes down, the people are in the water, you throw everything you possibly can to get them out of the water. That's where we are. There's a huge deflationary shock. The central bank's in on this, the Treasury's in on it, and so is everybody else. So I think the answer is you have to throw everything you have at it. And the worry will be that in October or September, government officials will go, enough's enough. Now we've got to get people back to work again. And the worry is that even though you say, I'm going to open, the question is, will people like you and me go to sports events? Will we go to pubs? Will we go to bars? And if the answer is we're not going to do that, that means the recovery is very slow. And it means that there's not enough money circulating. The central bank and the government have to step in.
So what could you do to help all those young people we heard right at the top of this programme who are feeling hopeless? Are you talking about massive government spending?
Well, I think you probably are. I mean, I think the best analogy is if you go to FDR, what did FDR do? And this was what he did for men, and there's things you can think of for women, but FDR thought about a thing called the Civilian Conservation Corps. I mean, I want people to think about there are 720,000 16-year-olds leaving schools in June. What are you going to do with them? College looks less attractive than it did. Let's say half of them managed to go to college. Well, that leaves you 350,000 16-year-olds and 350,000 17. What are you going to do with them? There isn't jobs for them. And what we know is if you don't do something to help the young, they can't make a foothold in the labour market and they get scarred. So the answer is absolutely the young are at the front of this. In the US already, the unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds is 33%. So absolutely, Christian. I mean, you have no alternative. You have to step in. You have to provide schemes that, I mean, maybe this conservation scheme, which is you do things on climate change and other things, but you can't leave these kids because this will be a disaster.